And I think one of the things that we all have to remember is that we're all one race, and that's human.
Welcome to Bitch Talk. I'm your host, Erin.
And I'm co-host Ange, aka Captain Party.
And for more than 11 years, the show has celebrated underrepresented voices in pop culture and beyond.
But not in the snore kind of way, which is why our listeners and followers have graciously voted us Best of the Bay, Best Podcast on 48 Hills for 3 years in a row. Three-peat, bitches.
If you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram and check out our website, Bitch Talk Podcast, and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're begging you to judge us. When does that ever happen? Oh, you're not going to say anything?
What would I say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, on with the show. Clink.
Hey, Bitch Talkers, we are at SFFilm Fest 2025, and we are speaking with the participants of the film, the chaplain and the doctor, and I'm going to have them, well, the participants and director, I'm going to have them introduce themselves, so I'll go with Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Zitter. I am a physician and filmmaker who works at a hospital in Oakland, California, and what else can I say? I'm happy to be here.
Hello, I'm Betty. I'm the chaplain on the palliative care team at Highland Hospital, Alameda Health System. Mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother.
Healer, both of you. Mm-hmm. Jessica, I'm going to have you tell our listeners what the film is about.
The film is about a relationship, a friendship between two people who come from different professions, different worlds, and really come together around shared values, crossing silos, professional silos, and all of those types of things, and really having a powerful relationship that has improved both of our lives, I think.
It's also about a doctor and a chaplain working together for the common body, because each body is physical, spiritual, and social, and so holistically working together in a team.
So when did the idea of this documentary come about for you, Jessica, as both a subject in the film and as a director? Like, why did you want to shoot the film now? And Betty, were you all in right away, or were you hesitant?
This film actually came in a very circuitous way. I was just sort of learning how to be a filmmaker. This was before I even did anything sort of professional. And I just was so fascinated by the things I was learning, being Betty's friend and colleague, that I started really audio taping her with my iPhone at the beginning. This was 8-9 years ago. And then eventually I had one shoot in 2018 where she said to me, oh yeah, my whole family's coming over to do advanced care planning with me. And I was like, can I film it? So that was 2018. That scene is in the film. And then it just sort of made its own way into an actual film.
How did you feel about her wanting to do a documentary and following you around with a camera?
I was used to it. I was fine. Jessica's always putting the camera in my face, and I'm a talker. So she was always saying, can you say that again? So it was just natural. As long as I was doing it with her, I was very comfortable.
I loved the conversation around, well, first of all, you met in 2013, and there was a case that came in, and Jessica used the phrase gangbanger. And Betty was like, well, that's an assumption, because we're in a place and a time, and I love that you both kind of sat down afterwards and really talked about this. Can you talk about that, what that meant to this relationship moving forward and through the documentary?
Well, first of all, I wasn't upset, because you work around people in the hospital and hospice, and people have opinions about people who things happen to, and those terms come up. And I know that if you get the story, people change. And working in the hospital, that happened a lot with a lot of doctors and nurses, where they would say something and I would get the story, and then I'd go say, do you know that person's story? And so I wasn't upset about the term, but it was a point of growth. Because first of all, Jessica didn't have to ask me what I meant or how I got the story, And that really, for me, began the relationship, that she called me and said, I read your note in the chart. How'd you do that? And that for me was like, she's interested.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say that one of the things about being a doctor, certainly, and being in healthcare in general, is that there's a value placed on knowing everything and shortcutting things. And labels just naturally result from that kind of thing. When you're trying to do things quickly and you're trying to sound like you know everything, because it's scary to be, it's honestly scary to be a doctor. And so there's something about labeling this person, labeling that person, and you don't necessarily realize you're doing it. You think you're bringing charity and compassion to everybody, but you realize that by doing these labels, and Betty really called that out in me, and it was really a very important, pivotal moment for me. It's a terrifying thing to be accused by somebody of being insensitive to them, to their people, to anybody in general. It's like you want to see yourself in a certain light, and I think it's just something that we can all benefit from, understanding where we have blind spots.
I had a coworker say about a person, and this wasn't a patient, it was a family member, that they were ghetto. And so I feel like every time I hear something that gives me an opportunity to teach, I'm a teacher at heart. And so for me, it's just a matter of teaching. It's not a judgment call on that person that says it, but it's a matter of teaching.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing, which is, these conversations really go better when you feel called in than called out. And I think we're all afraid of being called out. Like, it's just not, no one wants to be called out for being racist or for being, misgendering someone. Or there's so many reasons, and I think we all kind of go into a defensive position. And the thing about my relationship with Betty is she made me feel safe. We were friends, and we became friends. And I think she had a place of safety for me to explore things that I may not have explored otherwise. So thank you.
Jessica's always apologizing, and I say to her a lot, love means never having to say, I'm sorry.
You just said that this morning.
Oh, I do love how you show medicine in a different light, in a different conversation about medicine. Jessica's coming from the science background, and Betty, as a chaplain, you come with more of a spiritual, holistic view of healing and what these patients are going through. And instead of there being a hierarchy of this is more important than this, it's sort of like, why don't these two sides ever work together? Why doesn't that happen naturally?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of our relationship, because it has come together in a way that shows that it doesn't undermine the doctor's work for the chaplain to be there. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there was a team in the hospital who said to me, a team of doctors, they had a patient, and they said, Betty, could you go to this meeting with us, because we can't seem to get through to this patient. And he was an African American. And so I listened. So I go in, I sit, and they're talking to the patient, and they're saying to the patient, we want to wean you off of this pain medicine. And I'm watching the patient's face, and he's getting angry. And I said to the doctors, I said, can we stop the conversation for a minute? I said to the patient, I said, so what are you hearing when they say we want to wean you off? And I don't know if I can use the F word, but...
Please do.
Okay. So what he said was, I'm no fucking baby. I don't need to be weaned. Mm. And so I said to him, I said to the patient, I said, what they're trying to say is they want to bring your pain medicine down as your pain goes down so that you don't get addicted. And he said, yes, bring my pain medicine down. I don't want to be addicted. Mm-hmm. But it's sometimes it's the language for different patients. Now, they may have said that to another culture and they wouldn't have been upset about it. So I find myself teaching doctors about, especially my culture, who have been talked down to a lot and treated like we're not intelligent. Don't go in talking baby talk, Mm-hmm. People get up, and don't go in talking, we're going to try. Because for us, it sounds like you're experimenting. Someone else, it sounds like you're doing a good thing. You're trying something, you're going to try something else. And when the doctors go out and the patient says to me, are they experimenting on me? Mm-hmm. And I say, why? Well, they said they're going to try this, and if that don't work, they're going to try this, and I feel like they're experimenting. Doctors don't know that. And so the chaplain can go back to the doctors and say, this is what the patient is feeling.
If I can follow that up with you, Jessica, I love how you talk about in medical school, they don't prepare you to deal with human suffering. They give you all the knowledge in the world of how the body works on a functional level, but not how to deal with it emotionally. So can you talk about your growth in that field and how Betty has guided you on that?
Yeah, it's not just that they don't teach you, but you are rewarded for being someone who's science first and doing procedures and doing all this stuff, and you're not rewarded at all for being somebody who questions and who asks and who's curious and who is collaborative and who's compassionate. Those are not rewarded. Certainly in ICU medicine, which is where I come from, and other kinds of disciplines that are very intense. So you don't have the tools, you don't have the sort of the communication skills, you don't have the actual tools for what I do this first, and I do this first, and this third. But you also, it's not only the tools, it's also the attitude. And I think that's something I think we can really start to change. And that's something that Betty and I have changed. And Betty actually said earlier today, she said, I believe this, that the culture in the hospital is starting to change because people have seen this film being made about the two of us, and it starts to, that's how cultures change, is when just something happens. That's how my experience changed, just because Betty said something that shifted my brain, and I think film can do that.
I had a new doctor come up to me and he said, who do I talk to in order for me to pray with a patient? And I said, the patient. Mm-hmm. I said, if the patient wants prayer, then you can pray with them. And that was the first time. It was like, wow, a young doctor. And so I was telling Jessica today that doctors are coming up and saying, Betty, it's been a really difficult day. And I'll say, would you like a hug? And they say, yes. And I've had them fall in my arms and get hugs. And I've had, just this past week, I had the doctors come up and say, thank you so much. We appreciate your work. That's new.
That's new.
That's new.
And that's specific to our locale. Just the example, the visuals. And I hope that once people see the film, it will become even more powerful in that location of that hospital, and eventually, hopefully, around the country.
Yeah. I want chaplains to understand their role in a broader way. I want them to know that they're not just spiritual people, but they are comforters, and they are listeners, and they are advocates for the patient with the doctors, and they're advocates for the doctors with the patient. Because I can say to a patient, when they ask me these questions that they don't ask the doctor, I can say, well, no, they're not experimenting on you. They're really trying, so I can advocate both ways. And that's a powerful role for the chaplains, but not all chaplains know that. So I hope this film will open up the avenue for chaplains to grow as well.
I'm going to go back to the scene that you just talked about Betty speaking with her family about her advance directives, because this is something that I think our generation-ish is trying to get our families to talk about. And that part of the family has a hard time, even if you even bring it up. It's like, oof, I don't want to go there. So why was it important to include that in this film? And can Betty do some kind of, TED Talk about advance directives? Because it was just like, I'm just preparing you. I'm just being prepared. That's all it's about.
Listen, if every elder in a family, sorry, don't mean to call you an elder.
And even younger,
all of us. If all of us could do that favor for our families, to really step back and say, we really need to talk about this, like getting fire insurance. This is something that will happen. What are our preferences and values around this? This was a beautiful thing, a beautiful moment.
And my mother always said what she wanted. She said, I don't want a biopsy. I don't want surgery. I don't want to be in the hospital. And when it's my time, I just want you to let me go. And so when she was in the hospital and the doctors were saying, well, we could do a biopsy, we could do this, and they called all the children, and we were in different states, and we all agreed because we'd heard it from her all our lives. We knew what she wanted. And so it's important to relate to your family what you want. 'Cause we get that all the time in the hospital, and then you end up not having what you want, but what the family wants.
And you end up with lots and lots of family members in conflict and ruined relationships and suffering for the patient and suffering for the family as they witness this suffering. Most people understand what non-beneficial treatment is. They see it on the patient's face. They see it, and if people are subjected to it, because that's what the default pattern is, it causes terrible strife and distress.
Yeah. And some people want to be on life support and some don't, and I don't. And so I did that, and I told Jessica, said, well, Betty, if we can bridge you from where you are to where you were, I said, can you guarantee it? And she said, well, no. I said, then I don't want it.
She's very clear. I may not agree with her preferences, and in some ways I don't, but I respect them. We've gone over it so many times that I think she's clear. So what are you going to do? That's the choice.
Especially when you've lived, 80, 90 years, and you see these people in the families, and the patient may have already said, I don't want this and don't want that, but now the family said, oh no, we want to put them on life support. It was like, oh my God. Yeah.
It's important to plan for it.
And it's important to solidify that with your family, because it can be changed. They can change it, and the doctors will listen to them. And so I think the family, it's important. That's important to have that conversation.
Doctors are so much more comfortable just treating people and doing more and more and more. That's the easiest thing for us. Just keep them, I call it the end-of-life conveyor belt. It's easy. And if there's anybody in the family who says, oh, no, but you got to, then we're like, oh, okay, they want it. So that's why we have this crisis right now of people dying in ventilator facilities, hundreds of thousands of people, at any time in our country. And it's really not what most people would ever say they wanted.
I do think that is another important topic that you touch on this film is instead of thinking of it as keeping them alive as long as you can, what is the quality of life that this person wants?
Alive?
And is the patient centered in this decision, or is it just the doctor, like you say, following this sort of conveyor belt? So I wanted to bring up, for the last 3 months of my mom's life, she was in and out of the hospital for 2 weeks at a time, because that was the maximum that her insurance would pay for. And then they'd put her in a nursing home, then something would happen and she'd go back in the hospital, back and forth for 3 months. And I really wish we had a palliative care system in that hospital to help guide us, because we don't grow up talking about this. So I knew, she shouldn't be going in and out of the hospital anymore. We should just let her rest, some form of hospice. But I needed somebody to tell me that,
of course,
because I don't want to be the one to say, okay, that's enough, tap out. I could only have dreamed to have a program like that at that time. So to the best of your knowledge, how many hospitals, even within the state or the country, have this palliative program? And if you can talk a little further about what that even is. Because I've never heard of it. Have you?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I've heard of palliative care, but it's just I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll take that. I mean, palliative care is actually a relatively new subspecialty in medicine that probably became a board-certified subspecialty in 2008. Before that, it was sort of practiced in different ways, but it's really become sort of solidified as a subspecialty of medicine that you take boards for, et cetera, since about 2008. And it's this new approach to care where you have people, this concept of an interprofessional team, where you've got a doctor, you've got a nurse, you've got a chaplain, you've got a social worker, in the best cases. Most large hospitals in the United States now have palliative care teams. So they're most of the time you'll be able to find one. They're not always fully staffed like that. Sometimes you'll have just a doctor, or sometimes you'll have just a nurse, and sometimes you just have a social worker. But hopefully and ideally you have a really full team. And it's really something, our goal, what we do is we, as Betty said, we maximize the quality of life. We maximize communication around decisions that can be made. Families don't know. It's not the family's responsibility to come in and say, oh, I want to take my mom off of this end-of-life conveyor belt. You need to have things presented to you in a way where you understand the likely scenarios and prognoses, and then merging that with what you know about the patient in order to come up with the best, most patient-centered plan that really is not just this default, pedal to the metal, let's do everything to this person, but really tailored to what's realistically happening with the medical illness, what's realistic about the prognosis, and what they wanted in terms of what was most important to them, quality, quantity, etc. So palliative care is a very important subspecialty. And I'll say one more thing about it, which is that it's the first specialty in medicine that pulls together and, in theory, values all of these different professions equally as members of the team. The reality is that even palliative care teams have their own hierarchy. And I think that's what, was happening on our team with me thinking, well, the doctors really, that's what we're doing. We're doing the majority of what's most important. Palliative, chaplaincy's nice, but the fact is what I've learned in making this film and in just being in Betty's orbit is we have to be working together in order to provide the best care for our patients, in order to truly heal people.
Yeah. I was introduced to palliative care in 2004 in Tanzania, in Arusha. And I attended the first palliative care conference there. And that was during the AIDS epidemic because people were dying and they had no curative method and so the only thing they could do was do palliative care. And so I was there for 2 weeks on an international hospice full team trip. So we had doctors and we even had administrators, we had social workers, and we had chaplain. I was the chaplain, I was the only chaplain. But we were there for 2 weeks, and I attended that conference.
Well, one really important thing to know about palliative care that is very confusing to people is that it is not hospice. Hospice is a subset of palliative care. Hospice is palliative care for dying patients. But there's a huge number of people who benefit from palliative care. You can see them in the film. Several of those patients are coming to the premiere. They're alive. Hopefully they're going to live for many, many, many years. So it's not just about dying. Hospice, yes, hospice patients are on their way. They're deemed to have, less than 6 months to live. But palliative care is not just about dying. It's about living.
So what we say when we explain palliative care to our patients is that palliative care comes along with curative care, where hospice doesn't. So the patients realize I don't have to be dying to get this compassionate, holistic care.
I wanted to bring up the place that you are in Highland. You're in Oakland. Today is a really interesting day in Oakland. I know, voting for mayor. And it's been a whole wild ride. But what do people get right about Oakland, and what do people get wrong about Oakland in your eyes? I'll start with Betty.
But I think what people get wrong about it, and I tend to fight about this, is that it is a violent place, no more violent than any other part of the country, that people don't care about one another. I live in Oakland, and our neighborhood, when we moved in, because we had moved out of Oakland, my daughter and I, we'd moved to Castro Valley, and she bought a house, so she wanted to move back to Oakland. And we love it because as soon as we moved in, people were waving, "Good morning." You're coming out in the morning, somebody's saying good morning, people walking up the street. I dropped my sunglasses, didn't even know it. And one lady was walking, they were walking, "Oh, are these your sunglasses?" It's community and family and a lot of love. Yes, there's crime in Oakland, but there's crime in San Francisco. There's crime all over the world. But Oakland is a place where people care about one another. And when you get on a block, my daughter goes walking every day, and I was concerned about her walking late in the evening, and I walked with her one day, and one of the guys on the porch, he said, "Oh yeah, I see your daughter walking out there. We're looking out for her. We're looking out for her." So it's that kind of thing. So Oakland is a place where families can grow and be together. And my daughter grew up there, and she said there was all races of people who came together, and if the kids were out in front sitting on somebody's car, and it happened to be a white family, they would come out and say, "Oh, would you mind getting off my car?" And no problem. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. I mean, it's one of the most diverse cities in this country. It's a place where people come together with very different lives, very different backgrounds, very different families, and I do feel the same way as Betty. It's just filled with magic and beauty, and something that you don't get when you live in a very homogenized place.
It has a lot of history too.
Yes, for
A
sure.
lot of history.
Important history. Yeah.
Speaking of important history, Betty, we get to celebrate your 80th birthday with you on this film, which was really a beautiful ceremony. I love how in your bio, fashionista is in there, and I completely agree.
I don't even know if she knows that.
Yeah. In your bio for the film, it says that you're a
say
fashionista.
She's a grandmother, a matriarch, a social justice activist, and a fashionista.
Correct. Yes, the purple theme at your birthday was incredible.
And gold.
Yes.
And gold. But there was talks of maybe cutting back a little bit, relaxing a little more. I wanted to know what the update is on that. Although we all agree your work is very important, have you been able to take some time for yourself?
Well, I have a wonderful supervisor, and I have a wonderful team. And in fact, I took off today because I've had medical stuff going on, so I had some shots in my sacroiliac yesterday, and the two doctors on our palliative care team text me back and they said, "Betty, we've got it," So I'm not ready to retire. And I may end up cutting back because of this film and doing a lot of stuff with the film. But I love what I do, and I've got a lot of new chaplains coming on, and I train and supervise them. And so I'm excited. I think I tell the team, I said, I feel better when I come to work. If I stay home, you get sick. Yeah, I feel better working, It's exciting. I had a patient who was very afraid, and the doctors had said to her, even if they would do a trach, even if we do the trach, you may die in surgery. That's how sick she was. So she was very afraid. But she has a cancer that they also said is curable. So holding that. So prayed with her before she went into surgery, and she came out and she made it. And so she said to the team, we went in to see her, and she said, "I want to be saved." And I said, "Oh, okay." So we did that little ceremony, and then she said she wanted to be baptized. So she wanted to be baptized yesterday when her family could be there. And so I go in the room, and the doctor called me, "Can you get up here because her family's here and they want to be baptized? She wants to be baptized." I said, I was on my way. So I get there, and I baptize her, and she has two nieces and a nephew. And the nephew said, "I want to be baptized too." So I baptized both of them. I mean, I can't get that sitting at home. And so I always say that I get as much as I give, and sometimes more. And I was walking with the CEO Friday, I think it was Friday, and he said, "Betty, I appreciate what you do." And I said, "I appreciate what you do." And he said, "Well, I can do what I do because of what you do." And I said, "And I can do what I do because of what you do." And so it's really all about all of us.
Yeah, it's a good moment to give a shout out to Highland Hospital. When you think about it, allowing a film crew, and this is their third time, by the way, allowing a film crew, an independent film crew, this is not a puff piece, by the way, into the hospital and letting them do what they needed to do and make the film that they needed to make is really an act of courage. And it's really, I think, a testimony to the CEO, who is James Jackson, who is a brave man who cares deeply about patient care and about Highland, and about compassion and about Oakland, and allowed us to really do this with trust. And I have to just shout it out. And of course, all of the people in the media department at Highland Hospital, thank you.
Yes. And the CEO was coming to my office one day because I do collages, Black History collages, and they were going to show them. And so he wanted to come in and see. And so he came to the office, and before he left, I said, "Can I tell you about a patient?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "We have a patient who has not had a shower. He's been here 2 weeks and he hasn't had a shower. He's homeless." And I said, "He's hungry, not because we don't feed him. He eats everything, but he's still hungry because he's homeless." And I said, and his bed needs to change. You can just see he's dirty. And so he said, "Thank you, Betty, for telling me that." That night, that man got a shower, he got a clean bed, and he got more food than he could eat. And the next day, we were able to care for him, and he was able to participate in the care because of our CEO.
But it brings up a point which we sort of made before, which is that if the healthcare team feels attacked or whatever and doesn't get the story or doesn't spend the time to bring the compassion into the room, bring the curiosity into the room, people pull back from patients at any hospital. This is what happens. This is the process. And I think that is what we have to acknowledge and see. It's human nature to pull back from feeling attacked or feeling like someone's saying you're stupid or you're bad and so how do we acknowledge that happens, acknowledge that it's part of the human brain and human behavior, and figure out ways to get around that. And I think Betty has helped me to learn that lesson.
And I think one of the things that we all have to remember is that we're all one race, and that's human. And so, I mean, I tell people, eyes are just eyes, hair is just hair, skin is just skin, but we're all human.
We're going to end there because I'm going to start crying.
I know, Betty. Now we need hugs.
You see why you're making a film about this?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I did want to ask if the other doctors are jealous of your friendship. They're trying to get in between you two, because I'd be like, I want in on this love, circle.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Jessica's been away from the hospital doing this film for a while, and doctors are saying, "Where's Jessica? When's she coming back?"
Miss it. It's like full-time work every day to get this film finished.
Yes.
And I think they see me and they expect to see her.
It's true. I got to get back there. Stat.
Well, the film is The Chaplain and the Doctor. It's at SFFilm 2025. Thank you so much, Betty and Jessica, for being on
Thank
Bitch
you.
Talk.
Thank
And thank you
you.
for doing this work.
Oh, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. You can find more information about this episode in our show notes.
If you're missing us, you can visit us at bitchtalkpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter and buy us a cup of coffee.
Did you know we're also on the radio? You can find us at bff.fm.
And lastly, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All the cool bitches are doing it.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.